So we are on Daf Gimel Amud Bet, where it says Minahani Mili, end of the line. So the Gemara now is gonna bring a Braita that's pretty much the entire Amud. It's a Braita that's the entire Amud that's gonna be discussing the following question. It says the Gemara Minahani Mili. How do we know this? We said in the Mishnah a lot of chidushim. We said you don't do yibum with an erva, with your daughter, even though the Torah says a mitzvah to do yibum, but not with an erva, not with your daughter or granddaughter or wife's daughter or daughter-in-law or whatever, any of those, mother-in-law. You don't do yibum. So how do we know that? And also, how do we know that you don't even do yibum to the other wives? Meaning her, that you don't do yibum to her, to the erva, right? Again, the case is your brother, someone's brother is married to his daughter or one of his arayot. So we said you don't do yibum to the daughter. If the brother dies, there's no yibum for the daughter, and there's no yibum for the tzara, for the co-wife, or the co-wife's co-wife, on and on. So how do we know this? So the Gemara says, Detanu Rabbanan, this following Braita. Pasuk says, Isha el achota lo tikach litzror. It says, a woman and her sister, you should not take litzror, to make them co-wives, to bundle them up together as co-wives. Legalot ervata aleha bechayeha, to reveal the erva of the wife's sister upon her bechayeha, when she's alive. So the word aleha, upon her, is extra. It's completely extra. The pasuk is just telling me you cannot marry two sisters. That's what the pasuk is telling me. Correct. That's Bechayeha. Yeah, but the word aleha is completely extra. What does it mean, don't marry it upon her when she's alive? Just say, don't marry your wife's sister as long as your wife is alive. What's aleha? So aleha mata mudlomar. Why does the pasuk say aleha? Lefisha ne'emar, because it says in the pasuk by yibum, it says Yevamah yavo aleha. It says the yavam, her brother-in-law, when someone's husband dies and they don't have any children, her brother-in-law, yavo aleha, comes on her. So the word aleha is connecting it to yibum. Okay, so we're saying person cannot marry two sisters, aleha. Aleha is connecting that to yibum. So shomea ani afilu ba'achad mikol arayot ha'amurot b'torah k'tuv medaber. When the Torah says do yibum, the Gemara says this is a massive chidush, which is going to segue into a major topic. The Gemara says, I would have thought that the mitzvah of yibum would mean it doesn't matter who the brother is married to, you have a mitzvah of yibum. Even if the brother is married to someone's daughter, doesn't matter, you have a mitzvah of yibum. That's what I would have thought. Even if the brother is married to your wife's sister, right? That's the pasuk we're talking about. I would have thought that if the brother is married to the wife's sister, meaning two brothers married two sisters, I would have thought there's a mitzvah of yibum. So ne'emar kan aleha v'ne'emar lehalan aleha. So the word aleha appears in the pasuk by wife's sister, and it also appears in the pasuk by yibum. Ma lehalan bimkom mitzvah, just like when it says aleha by yibum, it's talking about when there's a mitzvah. Afkan bimkom mitzvah. So too, when it says the word aleha by not marrying wife's sister, it's even in a situation where there's a mitzvah, even in the situation where there's yibum. V'amar Rachmana lo tikach, and the Torah says don't take your wife's sister. So the fact that it says aleha connects it to yibum, and we learn from there, even in a scenario of yibum, you cannot take your wife's sister. I would have thought that maybe when it comes to yibum, it overrides and you could do it. No, kamash malan, even in a situation of yibum, it says aleha to connect it to yibum, that even in a situation of yibum, there's an isur of taking your wife's sister. So the Gemara says, En li elahi, tzarata minayin. The Gemara says, great. I learn that a person cannot do yibum to his wife's sister. But how do I know that if the brother, let's say two brothers marry two sisters, and one of the brothers has a few other wives also, how do I know that all the other wives are also p'turot from yibum? So Talmud lomar litzror. Because the pasuk said, Isha elachota lo tikach litzror. The word litzror in that pasuk teaches me that even the tzarot, even the other wives, are going to be piturot from yibum. So ein li ela tzarata, tzarat tzarata minayin. Okay, the Gemara says, okay, fine. So I see from there that the co-wives of the original erva, of the sister-in-law, of the wife's sister, her co-wives are piturot from yibum. How do I know that that extends to the co-wives of the co-wives?
What about, on that point of Lissor?
Yeah.
If outside of the Yibum context, if someone wanted to marry a co-wife of his wife's sister, could he do that?
Yes.
So why would we only extend it to Yibum and not to the regular Isser?
Because there is, we find that there's an Isur by Yibum. So Litzror is coming to extend that Isur. We don't find ever that there's an Isur by just marrying a co-wife of a relative. So the Gemara says, Tzarat Tzarata Minayin. Talmud Lomar, Litzror velo Latzur. It could have said Latzur, but it says Litzror in a different way to teach me additionally that it goes even further to the co-wife of the co-wife and the co-wife of the co-wife, and as many brothers that there are, it could just continue and continue. Ve'en li ela achot isha. So the Gemara says, okay, great. All I have is achot isha, wife, sister. Shar arayot minayin. How do I know other arayot? How do I know daughter? How do I know, other arayot if they marry a person's brother that there's no yibum for them or for the co-wives? So amart ma achot isha miuchedet shehi erva. V'chayavin al zedona karet v'al shigigata chatat. So the Gemara says we're going to do what's called a mematzinu. Mematzinu means we apply the rule to everything else that falls under the same category as this, that's like this. So just like achot isha, just like the wife's sister is an erva, and chayavin al zedona karet. If someone is together with his wife's sister on purpose, knowingly, it's a chiyuv karet. Val shigigata chatat. And if he does it mistakenly, they swap, he thinks it's his wife, he didn't realize, then he brings a korban chatat. Vasura liyavim. And he's not allowed to do yibum to her. So afkol shehi erva. So we're going to extend that to every erva that falls under the same boat. That's chayavin al zedona karet val shigigata chatat. Anything that would get a minimum of karet, or you would have to bring a korban chatat if he did it by accident. Asura leyavam. They're also going to be asur to the yavam, to do yibum. So Gemara says, okay, en li ela tzarotehen.
Co-wife of the wife. How is that correct?
What?
Co-wife.
So what we're saying is the wife, the sister, wife's sister is karet. So just like she is pitura from yibum, so to anyone who is karet is going to be pitura from yibum. Then now the Gemara says, okay, how do we know that extends to the co-wives? That's this line. So the Gemara says, what?
Okay.
The karet, there's no karet for the let's the Gemara says, so ve'en li elahen tzarotehen minayin. How do I know this applies to the tzarot, to the co-wives? So amart ma achot isha miyuchedet shehi erva v'chayavin al zedona karet ve'al shigigata chatat. Just like achot isha is, again, it's an erva and it's karet, and if a person does it by mistake, it's korban chatat v'asura leyavam, and she is not allowed to do yibum. But tzarata asura, her co-wife is asur also. We're not saying that the co-wife has karet. That's not part of the discussion here. But her co-wife is asur. Happens to be the co-wife also will have karet, because when the co-wife is asur, that means there's no mitzvah of yibum, which means she's eshet ach. It's the brother's wife, which is bekaret. But either way, she paters her co-wife. So afkol shehi erva v'chayavin al zedona karet v'al shigigata chatat v'asura leyavam tzarata asura. So we learn from wife's sister, just like the wife's sister is karet, and if you do b'shogeg it's chatat, and she's not allowed to do yibum, and she makes her co-wives asurot. so too anyone who is chayavin al zidona karet, any erva that's chayavin al zidona karet, shigata chatat, and is asura to do yibum, also will pater their co-wives. So mikan amru chachamim chamesh esrei nashim potrot tzaroten v'tzarot tzaroten min hachalitza u'min ha'yibum. From here we say that chachamim said that 15 women are pater their co-wives and their co-wives from yibum at sof ha'olam, until the end of time, however many brothers there are. But this is the makor. So again, the makor, if anyone asks you, how do we know that an erva is patur from yibum, is patura from yibum, and how do we know that not only that, but her co-wives also are paturot? So we learn from this pasuk. It says aleha, by wife sister, to teach me even in a scenario of yibum. By yibum it says aleha, and by wife sister it says aleha, specifically to teach me even in a scenario of yibum. It's asur. Yachol shani marbe af shesh arayot chamurot me'elu. I might have thought to include 6 arayot that are more strict. So later on, we're going to have a mishnah about 6 arayot that are even more strict, that are going to be asurim to all the brothers, not only this brother. So I might have thought that we would include that. Sheyut tzarotem asurot, that the co-wives should be asur. Meaning, I'll give an example. One of these relatives, the shesh arayot, is a person's mother. If his brother takes as a wife his mother,
how's that possible?
So it's not possible. That's why it's arayot chamurot. Meaning, he is living together with his father's wife, with his brother's mother, and with some other ladies also. He has them as wives. So I might think, well, if your wife's sister is pater from yibum, so your mother for sure would be pater from yibum. But we say no.
That marriage isn't even a marriage, no?
Right. So we say no. Amart ma achot isha miyuchedet shehi erva v'chayavin al zedona karet v'al shegigata chatat ve'efshar linaseh la'achim. She's able to marry the brothers. That marriage is a marriage by wife's sister. V'asura le'yavam, and she cannot do yibum. V'tzarata asura. That's when the tzara is asura. So af kol shehi erva v'chayavin al zedona karet v'al shegigata chatat ve'efshar linaseh la'achim. We keep on refining this mematzinu, but we're coming out. This is the final version, that anything that is like achot isha, what are the criteria that it needs to have? Number 1, chayavin al zedona karet. It's chiyuv karet v'al shegigata chatat, and if it's done by shogeg, by mistake, it's a korban chatat. Number 2, it's an erva, and it's zedona karet shegigata chatat, and also efshar linaseh le'achim. It's someone who is an erva to the person himself, but can marry his brothers. V'asura liyavam, and she cannot do yibum. V'tzarata asura, her co-wife is asur. So anything that has the same criteria, af kol, so to any other isur, shei erva, that's an erva. V'chayavin al zedona karet, and it gets karet if it's done on purpose. V'al shigigata chatat, and it'll get chatat if it's done by mistake. Ve'efshar linaseh la'achim, and another criteria, she needs to be able to marry the brothers. It needs to be the type of erva that can marry the brothers. V'asura le'yavam, she cannot do yibum. Tzarata asura, the tzara, the co-wife, is asur. So yatzeu shesh arayot chamurot me'elu. That will exclude the 6 arayot that we're going to read about in a later Mishnah, hoil v'efshar linaseh la'achim, because those arayot are not able to do kiddushin to the brothers. The kiddushin is not going to be chal. It's not going to be. They're so strong of an erva that it's not only an erva on, not so strong, but it's not only an erva on the individual, the subject, but it's an erva on the brothers. So in that case, there's no yibum. So tzaraten mutarot. In that case, the tzarot are mutarot. She'en tzara ela me'ach, because a tzara, and that's going to be asur, only comes from a brother. Meaning, okay, so let's just recap what we said. few bullet points that are very important. Number one, we said the makor of everything of Yibum comes from the pasuk of wife sister. What does the pasuk say? The pasuk says, Aleha. Isha alachota lo tikach litzror legalot ervata aleha bechaya. Aleha teaches me, even in a scenario of Yibum, because by Yibum it uses the word Aleha, teaches me even in a scenario of Yibum, there is an Isur to be with your wife's sister. Aleha teaches me even when it's Yibum, it says Lo tikach, you can't be with your wife's sister. From there we learn, wife's sister cannot do Yibum. Then we say, okay, how do we know that applies to the co-wives and the co-wives? Because it says litzror. That word litzror teaches me, litzror teaches me not only the erva herself, but her co-wife and even her co-wives' co-wives. Okay, that's the makor. Now, how do we know all the other arayot also? How do we know if someone's brother marries their daughter, or their mother-in-law, or their wife's daughter, or their daughter-in-law, or anyone that we mentioned in the Mishnah? How do we know that there's no yibum by all of those? So the Gemara says, simple formula. It follows wife-sister. Anything that has the same criteria as wife-sister, anything that is going to be, it's an erva, and it's chiyuv karet, if a person does it on purpose, and you have to bring a korban chatat if you do it on shogeg, and it's someone who is an erva to the individual himself, but is allowed to marry his brothers, that anyone that fits that criteria, which is a list of these 15 women in the Mishnah, is going to be, there's no yibum for her co-wives, and her co-wives' co-wives, just like by achot isha. That's the limud. Good? Yeah? It's a tough amud. It's a lot of drashot, but it's pretty simple. Once you go over it once or twice, you get it down packed. It's pretty simple. Okay, so now this kind of segues a drop. We're just going to get a little bit of a taste of the following sugya. So the Gemara says, or well, not yet. So the Gemara says, Azhara shamanu, onesh minayin. The Gemara says, okay, great. We found that there's an isur of yibum to these arayot and their co-wives. But onesh minayin, how do we know that there's a punishment? Meaning, how do we know that there's going to be an isur karet also on the tsarat erva, on the co-wife of the erva? Meaning, again, the erva to me, let's just go with this case, is the wife's sister. The wife's sister is married to a person's brother. Okay? The tsarat erva is her co-wife. Okay? Case clear in everyone's mind. The wife's sister is married to brother, and then she also has a co-wife. So how do we find that there's an isur to be with the co-wife even after the brother dies, and it's because it's a tsarat erva. Everybody has to become familiar with these terms. Tsarat erva, since that lady is a tsarat erva, she's a co-wife to the woman who's an erva to me. That's we learn from these psukim that relationship is not allowed. But onesh minayin, how do we know that there's any punishment for that? So Amar Kra kikol asher yaasem mikol hatoevot. The pasuk says anyone who does any one of these isurim karet, and included in that is brother's wife, when there's no mitzvah of yibum. So anytime someone's with their brother's wife in a scenario where there's no mitzvah of yibum, it's karet. So in this scenario, that tzara, the co-wife, there's no mitzvah of yibum on her, because she's a tzarat erva, she's a co-wife of someone who's an erva to me. Once there's no mitzvah of yibum, by default, automatically, she retreats to being an isur erva, and it's karet.
But didn't we learn yibum from the karet?
We learned. What do you mean?
We say since it's a karet, it falls on the same category.
Any erva that I'm allowed to marry, that I'm not allowed to marry, that the brother is allowed to marry, that is karet on me, means there's no yibum for her, and then once there's no yibum for her, the whole any of the wives, there's no yibum for any of the wives.
Okay.
Now the other wives are not related to me, but there's an isur karet because anytime someone is with their brother's wife in a scenario where there's no yibum, necessary, it's karet. That's the karet. The karet is a karet of
But
eshet.
how do we learn that the co-wife is part of the is follow the system?
So we learn from the word litzror to teach me that it extends to the tzarot, to the co-wives. That word was for that drasha. Okay, so now just the next few daf are a very fundamental sugya. It goes for like 3-4 daf. I don't remember exactly how long. It's a sugya of aseh doche lo ta'aseh. When you have a mitzvah aseh and a mitzvah lo ta'aseh going against each other and you can't accomplish both of them, which one overrides which? So, yeah, we're going to get to all of that. So, right, Mila and Shabbat and whatever. So, over here, the application is, if you noticed, we said that if it weren't for the pasuk that says Aleha, I would have thought that you would do Yibum to an Erva. You would do Yibum to your wife's sister. That's what I would have thought. The pasuk has to come and tell me, no, Aleha, it's coming to connect to Yibum. Even in a situation of Yibum, you can't do it. But that means that if there was no pasuk and no drasha, I would have thought that the mitzvah of Yibum would override the erva of wife's sister. Right? Meaning, again, how did we learn? It's not so complicated. How did we learn that Yibum is not allowed? You're not allowed to do Yibum to the wife's sister. 2 brothers married 2 sisters. 1 brother died, so there's no Yibum. How do we know? It's your wife's sister. Okay, how do we know there's no Yibum? We learned from a drasha. The pasuk says, Aleha, to come teach me. You can't take this wife's sister, Aleha, even when there's Yibum. You can't take her. That means if I wouldn't have had the pasuk, what would I have said? Do Yibum. That's what I would have said. I would have thought, do Yibum to the wife's sister.
That's not so crazy, because the whole Yibum is an Isser already.
Good. Beautiful. So yes. But the point is, you see the question. Let's just read. Just want to start a little bit segue into the next Gemara. It says the Gemara, Ta'ama de katav rachamana aleha. The whole reason that we're saying there's no yibum here is because the Torah said the word aleha. Halav hachi. But if that wasn't the case, if the Torah would not have said that word, and we would not have had this drasha, Hava amina achot isha mi Yevamot. I would have thought that a person can do yibum to his wife's sister. My ta'ama, why would I have thought that? So the Gemara says, De amrinan ati aseh v'dachi lo ta'aseh. Because we would say, an aseh, the mitzvah aseh of yibum comes and overrides the mitzvah lo ta'aseh of not marrying your wife's sister. So you have a mitzvah aseh, you do yibum. A mitzvah lo ta'aseh, you can't take your wife's sister. What do? I would have thought you do the yibum. You forget about the lo ta'aseh. So therefore we need a drasha. Now the Gemara questions this with a major question that's going to lead us through a big journey. The Gemara says, 1 second. Emar da'amrinan ati aseh v'dachi lo ta'aseh. Lo ta'aseh greda. That which we learn, we say in the world out there, aseh overrides a lo ta'aseh. That's a regular lo ta'aseh. Lo ta'aseh sheyesh bo karet. If you have a lo ta'aseh that has karet, midachi, you don't do an aseh. An aseh, mitzvah aseh doesn't override a lo ta'aseh that has karet. Mitzvah aseh overrides a lo ta'aseh regular, not karet. And then the Gemara gets into the whole makor. Where do we learn that an aseh overrides a lo ta'aseh? Different examples, different drashot. So that's, Be'ezrat Hashem, going to be for next time. But this is kind of segueing into, this is going to take us throughout the next daf, maybe a week and a half, all about aseh doche lo ta'aseh. Yeah.